Good afternoon, and welcome to the Interaction Design Arts online open day. My name's Joel Karamath, as you can see on the screen, and I'm the course leader, have been for several years now, and we're going to go through just sort of like a series of projects and concepts about the course as much as anything else, and really look at the philosophy of it as much as anything else. I will also be joined by a current third year, Rosa, and one of our alumni, Digby, so you'll be getting some of the student experience on the course as well. So if you have any questions as we're going along, please pop them in the chat and we'll try and address them, either myself or the students for you, and hopefully we'll be able to give you a sort of understanding of the physical space as much as anything else. I know it's always difficult and online, and we can give you information, but I think the idea of experience and community is something that we want to look at today. Just kind of got a couple of housekeeping things before we start talking about the course as we go. Okay, so these are things, the process we're using here is called webinar around this, and it's going to be recorded as well, and just good broadcast quality about this, so you should be able to go back in and look at things later on as well. And see, as I said, we'll have Q&As at the end, but if you want, as we go, you can put in any questions into the chat. So I think there's a really interesting, why London College of Communication, why are you going to come here? I think there's a number of reasons that we can tell you about that. The sort of like most obvious one is in terms of UAL as an art school and as a design school. It's probably second to none in terms of undergraduate education. It's probably the best that there is. In terms of art colleges around the world, it would come second to the RCA, but the RCA is a completely postgraduate environment, and I think the experience that you get from the location as much as anything else is also important. You're going to be in the center of London when you're with us, and I think that has a really big impact in terms of the experience, or not just of your student experience, but in terms of your social and cultural experience outside of that. You can walk to places like the South Bank, the National Gallery, the White Cube, and all that, and that level of inspiration that you can draw from, I think there are very few cities in the world that can compete with that. Maybe Paris and New York, but you also then have the sort of like dynamics of London as well around that. So I think the other thing is London College of Communication is also part of a much bigger uni, like University of the Arts, which is huge. It's 18,000 students at the college, with a really diverse student cohort, as you can see from here, from at least 130 countries around that. And that's really reflected in diversity and makeup of all the courses through UAL. It's a dynamic and inclusive environment, but I think there's also, it's not a place that tries to rest on its laurels, in a sense. And in recent years, the school, and particularly LCC, has, and the design school at LCC, has really sort of made an attempt to engage with the dynamics of social, environmental, cultural change that's happening around the world. And this has sort of like started up sort of a couple of years ago, when the design school manifesto, and how we wish to approach design education in the 21st century, and what that means, how you draw on tradition, but how you also move ahead for the future. As I said, it's LCC is a college in a university that's made up of really 6 different environments, but even when you come to LCC as well, there's different schools, and within that, there's the design school which we're part of, and within the design school itself, it has a number of programs. The programs that are highlighted in red are going to be new ones starting next year. We're highlighted in blue here, and as you can see, we're in interaction communications program, and so we're in there with a number of other BA courses, but also each program has not only undergraduate but postgraduate courses, and we have for what a sister course on the undergraduate side, but also a direct sort of MA postgraduate course in interaction as well. And I think the experience of how these courses cross over and the environments that each one of them has is really important and contribute to an overall student experience at LCC, which I think is really important and valuable around there. So first question is always that one, if you're going to study illustration, you go home and tell your mum, and dad, you're going to be an illustrator. They think, oh, you're going to draw. If you tell them you're going to do typography, they think, oh, you're going to do posters. You go home and tell them you're going to do interaction, and they go, what? What does that mean? And so I think it's important to even look at the terminology to begin with and say, okay, I would argue that of all the courses I know with interaction in the title, we've probably got the broadest remit. Most courses tend to use interaction and digital as if they're interchangeable. We don't, we're much broader than that, and to the point where we define ourselves as being media agnostic. And by that, we mean that very rarely, by the time you get round to the third year, do we set a specific media for any given brief. It's very much about how the students interpret problem solving from their own points of view that we aim for. Now, this project that I'm going to show you now is really interesting for a number of reasons. In that, so let me just turn the volume down on that. I'm just going to show you in that. Richard, who designed this, was the very first student I accepted onto the course when I came, because he came to us as a direct second year. And because he was studying audiology, he was making hearing aids, and he sort of panicked when he came to us and said, I'm not really a designer, I don't do such and such. And I said, actually, look at what you're doing. Actually, all the things that you can't do on the course that you're on now are the design aspects, because they were very much about, oh no, we make hearing aids, or we make things for you to hear better. And this was just a really, really nice project, something he'd started when he was on IDA, but then later on, as you can imagine, this was a very, really popular thing that poured drinks for you, designed as initially as a water fountain, but later iterations of this got taken up by Moe Shandong, who used it at a couple of their openings. Imagine how popular a machine that pours you champagne for free and automatically. Who would have thought that was ever going to be popular? Whoops, did I lose my... There we go. That's a really good example of a sort of like student that I would say has a talent, but maybe caught in between two disciplines. And I always say that's kind of the way or the place that you want to be with IDA. It's almost like for the students that are interested in more than one thing, how to join two subjects together that you're interested in is really one of the things we really try and explore, that operating in the nexus between subject matter to a certain degree. Similarly, Daichi was another one. He's a very successful rapper in Japan at the moment. And I think it's really interesting that somebody came to us that had a real massive interest in music. And this is a project that, you know, we did with one of our external collaborators, which was Côte de Rhône, the wine company. And as part of this process, you know, Dutch was like, okay, this is a wine company. I don't really drink. How am I going to approach this? And I was like, well, actually, what do you do? And he was like, well, you know, I really like music. I'm a DJ and I rap, etc. And he actually sat down and he was watching people with wine, and he listened to a bottle being opened, and he just liked the popping sound. And literally he came in, and I'll pause that there for a minute because I want you to see it. Literally came into the pitch with the company and just went, I really like this sound. And everyone just kind of looked at him, right? But it was really the seeds of that whole idea of actually drawing on your own experience, which was really important. And so actually he ended up making a musical instrument out of the sound of corks popping. Stop back there. You know, and so that's a really great example of not only be caught between two disciplines, but also drawing on your own passions. I think that's a really important factor when we're looking for students on the course and what we want from you. If you've got an interest in something, we're interested in you. It's not necessarily, a lot of students think, okay, well, what they do on the course, I need to produce a portfolio for to tap into that. And yeah, that's true. More than anything else, though, is having your own personal interest in something that you want to bring in and develop, that we always look for with students around this. And very often you get a scenario where students think they want to do something. And like Maciek, who designed this, you know, was always going to be an illustrator as far as he's concerned. Sorry, can you hear me with the music up? Is that okay? So, you know, he was a really sort of pen and paper illustrator when he came onto the course, but he was really intrigued at the possibilities of how he could move on with illustration, but didn't want to leave his skill sets behind. And this is a really great example of, we spent so much time with him folding and crushing bits of paper out of the sketchbook that he used to work with, because he used a very, very specific type of cartridge paper. And then really understanding, actually, once you build these things in the digital world, it's not just a case of a series of pixels, etc., how they work, but, you know, really drawing on the fact of what paper is and what paper means to him as an illustrator. That was lay at the heart of this. And I think, you know, if you look at this on a really good screen, you can see the grain in the paper that he uses around it. And, you know, it's really quite fantastic in some ways. Let's close those off. Can I just check, is everybody okay with the sound levels on stuff that I'm playing?
Yeah, I mean, all good.
Thank you. Sorry, cheers. I just similarly, I think there's a really great idea on the course that finding your medium is really important. Now, a lot of students will come in and cross over and work on a number of things, but someone France that came in and did this piece was really, really interesting, because she ended up being a documentary filmmaker in the long run. And this was a really, really short piece that she better put the volume up on this one, that I would just like you to have a quick look at, about a guy that was that eats stuff. And when I say eat stuff, I mean anything.
Hello, Sean. Yeah. Okay then, son. I'll try and get over to her as soon as I can, son. Okay. Oh, you can, okay, oh, that'd be lovely. Okay, I'll see you in the morning then. Okay, I'll see you tomorrow. I didn't want to come anyway. No. Yeah. 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 No, I couldn't come anyway. Anyway, I'll see. Okay, see you tomorrow. I'll give you a phone call tonight, though. Okay, love you, boy. Bye. Yeah, I started in 1974, September 1974, and the estimation is that I've raised just over £4.5 million for handicapped children in the village. They had the Isle of Ale competition, being a teetotaler, but we went down to the law, and it was 5 pence a go, and my mates were just going drinking the top of it for 5 pence and getting drunk all. They got me to have a go at it in the first attempt. I broke the world record and it just snowballed from there. That's an Halloween night when I actually drank a pint of my wife's blood. That was when I'd done the world record for eating snails. I made a mistake there. I didn't know that you had to get these French ones. I got the snails out of my back garden and ate them with the shells and all. My son took one of my world records off of me, but I claimed it back the next day. When I very first started, and everyone thought it was going to change me, but it never did. I'm still just an out-and-out Londoner, a Millwall supporter, and I don't care what anyone says. People say to me, what world record do you appreciate most? And I say, every one of them's the same to me, because whatever world record I break has raised some money for handicapped children. Be it a £5, be it £1,000, it doesn't matter. Ready? I don't ask for a rerun.
Now, the reason I showed that, because that's a 3-minute movie and it's about a very, very particular subject, about someone that eats to break world records for charity. But if you take into account that's a 3-minute movie, 9 times out of 10 people will be like, okay, quick, show the thing that he does. And you get that right at the end. But I think this is almost like one of the great examples of when we talk about what interaction is about. Ultimately, people think it's always like humans and things. I would always argue that interaction is always between people and people. Sometimes it might be through a thing, but you're always talking to or about another and engaging with another person. And I think what's so wonderful about this as a piece is that it spends most of the time giving you time to engage and understand who this person is and what they do, but more importantly, why they do it. And as a human, the actual thing is interesting, but it becomes very, very secondary to actually who the person is. And it really gives you a really nice level of what interaction can be when ultimately you're talking about a person and how you define them around that. Some of the things we do on the course, actually, this, I'll just show you an example of this, is like every year we work with the Science Museum. And this was a really interesting project in terms, it is a really interesting project, I should say, because we do it annually. And how we engage with them. Every year they have every month, I should say, they have a thing called Lates, and we choose one of them to do projects for, and they set a brief that our students answer and get involved in. This was a really, really nice one in terms of it's called If It's Not Grown, and really it highlights the fact that how environmental degradation is driven by consumerism. And so the fact that she's barcoded all these products and made a store within the Science Museum. She made a shop. But when you went up and scanned the barcode, instead of giving you a price, it gave you a list of all the minerals and that were involved in making that object and where they came from in the world, what their air miles were and what their carbon footprint was, which is a really interesting way about tying the two things together, consumerism and the environment, and how one impacts the other in some ways, and how even the simplest little things like pens have an impact. When you go into a shop, how can you escape? And the idea of the title was really great. If it's not grown, it's mined. Really talks about that whole idea of what sustainability is. And 9 times out of 10, most of the stuff that you use, that whether in phones, filaments in kettles or toasters, are mined resources with a finite lifespan to them. Similarly, this project is over 10 years old now, and it was called the Twitter Clock. This was a really interesting project in the sense that it's one of the first projects I ever saw anywhere that was really challenging what social media was. When you think about what's happening with Twitter now at the moment, it seems very, very prescient. And what you can see there is that every minute, this project highlighted the most popular word on Twitter for that minute, and all the other words behind it in terms of their size were okay, how important they were for the minute. But then at the end of every minute, the most popular word came up and it read it out for you. And it seems quite strange. And when we were testing it in the class, it was really interesting in that, you know, we had, oh yeah, it's Beyonce, J-Lo, Kylie, whoever was the popular stars at the time. Then all of a sudden it started, you know, screaming Osama, and we checked on the BBC, and that was just when Osama bin Laden got assassinated by US Special Forces. And we're like, wow, this is actually quite interesting. For about half an hour, and then it was back to J-Lo and Beyonce. And it was really strange that how that sort of immediacy and was like, oh wow, this could be really impactful, also quickly disappeared. And as a project, it was really nice because ITN took the project and kept it in their main office for a year. They took it and hired it for a year. So the actual news agencies were actually using it themselves. They thought it was interesting in terms of the way that you could aestheticize news in some way, which was really, really interesting. This is a nice project as well, because I think it's one of the things that highlights the crossover in IDA and the things that we do. This is from a recent graduate, Marta, and this is crossing over, I think, a number of things in terms of the way we look at, say, the environment and how science plays its impact on the course as well. I'll just let you see this first. Now that project, I think it's a really, really nice one. That was from our graduate degree show last year. And I think everybody, when they see the film, it's always like, oh yeah, she's just put noises to this and there's a soundtrack over it. The reality is what her project was looking at the way plants communicate through electromagnetic fields. And what she did, it's running currents through this. As you touch the plant, like with any other electric current, you change its resistance. And because of that, you change the flow of current along it, which she then gave an audio signature to as well. So actually you could play the plant depending on where you touch the plant, whether you were touching the leaves or not, you got an audio response from it. And it's a really interesting way to look at, say, when people talk about plant communication or bio design, how these things work. But by appropriating one media, sound, and allocating it to the way that plants communicate, it really gave it a joyously interactive outcome. People could not leave this alone during the degree show around that. But I think, you know, this is a really great project in terms of crossover, in terms of personal interest, the science projects that we evolved through the institutions like the Science Museum that we work with, and also sort of like trying to keep ahead of what's going on and the crossovers in design, moving into broader social and environmental issues. I think it's important, you know, when you're thinking about LCC and coming, you know, how big, there's like 5,000 students in this building alone, and the facilities that are available, you know, not just at the high end, but also the sort of traditional things that we have, whether it's, you know, analog photography, printmaking, letterpress, all these things are still here. And I think the idea that you build upon its historical foundations rather than move them out for new technology is really, really important. And it's something that's very specific to IDA in terms of, you know, we have a principle on the course about any project can be high tech, low tech, or no tech in there. The choice of material or media is irrelevant. It's okay. It's about what ideas and problems you wish to solve through your choice of media. I'm going to shut up for a little bit here because I'm going to talk about the studios for a little bit, and then I'm going to be quiet, I should say, in terms of how we've set up our studios and why they're different from so many of the other studios around college. A lot of the other courses have gone for a sort of like very white cube scenario, where we've gone for very specific identity and usage in our studios. So we've, in terms of space, we, you know, not necessarily the biggest studios. In fact, we're not the biggest studios, but what we've done is split them into three in a way that we can use them that best engage our students across the years. So very often you will get second year, third year, first year working together on things. Our main studio that we deliver lectures and stuff in is what we call our clean studio, and it's kind of the closest we have to a straight up lecture room around there. There's a wonderful picture of Digby in the old mothership, which we used to call them with. That's where we tend to have our computers. It's like where we tend to do program workshops for the specific programs that we use, like Max MSP or Arduinos, stuff like that. It's also the kind of place that I think the third year tend to make their home and their hub as much as possible. So because it's our central studio with the third year in as much, when we're teaching second year or third year and first year around that, they get to see what's happening, and they get to ask questions, not just from us, but from the students. And what we call the sort of like vertical and horizontal learning on the course is really, really big. And something that's invaluable to us is what we call our community of practice around there. And almost at the heart of our studio is sort of like of our studios is the dirty studio, which is a really rapid prototyping studio. We want people to make stuff. Because of that, we have our own tools, whether it's drills and saws, etc. Yes, there's a 3D workshop here. Yes, there's a creative technology lab, but sometimes you just need to go in there and do stuff and experiment. And this is really what we try and encourage in there. It's very much a maker-led course, you know, whether that's digital making or physical making. It's really, really important. I will be quite there. Digby or Rosa, would you like to interject anything there and sort of like maybe talk about your experience and how the studios work for you as a student and how that may differ from, say, other courses or that you know about at LCC?
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about that. I'm in my third year at the moment, and I'd never really worked very physically with like making objects and interactive pieces. I'd mainly worked kind of digitally or on flat media, and so this year I went away and did a year out in industry, and when I came back, I've really been able to make the most of using the Dirty Studio. Having that there and in a way that we can just do quick prototyping and quickly go from idea to physical idea and physical thing that you can feel and touch and develop from, it was a lot less intimidating. I think if you have never used tools before, you might be nervous to go straight to like the 3D workshop or any other parts of the university, but having this space so close, like within our own studio, it means that you can really play and develop your ideas, and also ask other students, because everyone there's on your course, there might be like a third year there and you're in your first year and you might not know how to use something properly or how to develop that particular idea, but the way that the course is set up and the rooms, it really encourages that discussion and like being able to help one another, which has been really, really good.
I'd just like to, yeah, I'd just like to sort of say that the studio is very much like an art school studio. But I think lots of studios on other courses lack that now. Where actually everything that you see in the studio is either brought in or made by a student, and it's yours to make, to sort of mold and make. Sort of like the football table that you saw in there was found from an old bar. It was brought in, we fixed it, and it's now part of IDA. Sort of, it's like almost like a community hub where you can bring in whatever you want, and what Joel and Rosa were saying about just having fun and playing sort of through design, and the studios really sort of facilitate
Don't
that.
you mean the hand-eye coordination machine, Digby?
Yeah, the hand-eye coordination machine. That, yeah, not the table football machine, of course.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, but I think both of you have tapped into something there, that college and course isn't just about coming in and getting information. It is an environment for you. You learn in an environment much more than you can just by getting information. It's the context of the information and the community that you're in. And I think, you know, the concept of a community of practice is probably one of the strongest things about the course. I don't know if people are in or start reading about things like NSS so far, which is the National Student Surveys, for as long as I can remember, the IDA student feedback has always been amongst the highest. And in the last few years, it has been the highest in the program by far. And I think that's something that we're really proud of, in a sense. I'm the course leader, so I'm bound to tell you it's good. But the proof of the cake is always in the eating, and the proof of a course is always in the success and the happiness of its students. And I think, in terms of outcomes, in terms of what students get in terms of grades, what jobs they go on to, which we have a really highly successful employment rate, and their feedback on the course is really, really spot on, and I think speaks volumes about the course more than anything I can say. Do you guys want to say anything else, either of you, or shall I move on? I know we're running out of Digby. Rosa, no? All right, let me move on. So sorry, Rosa, was that?
Oh no, I was saying we're good to move on.
Right. Okay, staff. Right, we are blessed on the course. As it said, we've got a lot of stuff that we try and encourage students to get involved in making, and they're hands-on. And to be honest, we could not get on without some of our stuff. Biggles has been on the course from day one, and I suppose you can just best describe him as a polymath. He, whether it's programming, whether it's straight up graphic design, whether it's building, he's got several patents to his name. Biggles can do it. secretly, when he's not in the studio, I go in and break things just to give him something to fix when he comes in. Sometimes he's a genuinely great problem solver, and I would quite happily say the best studio tutor that I've ever worked with in all my time at college, and I've been here 30 years now. You know, if you want a tutor that's in a studio and guiding students teaching design, I can't think of anybody better on this. And apart from that, he's a really genuinely lovely person and cares passionately about education and students on the course. Wouldn't swap him for anyone. Also, got a couple of new people on there, and Maria is really interested in this. She joined us 2 years ago, and she's on that cusp of what you call maybe a designer and an artist. She does a lot of stuff at like Ars Electronica and Crash Transmedial. She's had her work in there, but also interestingly enough that she had studied things like visual communication, but she also stopped for a while when she was doing things like programming and stuff on the course because she didn't like it, and studied philosophy. So, you know, as much as anything else, she's a philosopher, and how that crossover within the experience of fine art, design, and philosophy is something that's really invaluable on the course. A deep thinker, I think you can put her down for, but also a great maker as well. She's another one that likes to get her hands in there and dirty and get involved, or not just in constantly making her own products, but she's really committed to the way students are developing stuff and the way they learn as well through making. Your gaze, I think it's important that when you come here, we don't just give you our point of view and stuff, and we try and get you to explore things through the world in which you live in, and whether that's your religion, your culture, gender, sexuality, whatever, that should be at the heart of your design. We always try and say to students, don't start designing stuff because you think we're going to like it or you think the examiners are going to like it. Ultimately, at the end of the day, that's always a problem. Ultimately, you should have a signature on your work. And this was a really great project in that the student that's in the hijab wrote her dissertation on Iranian film, but as part of her research of that, it was always that whole idea of how Muslim women are represented in the arts around there. So I don't know if you know the original image from this. It's a painting by Cranach. She took a series of really famous artworks from the National Gallery and galleries around the world where they prominently featured naked women, and she replaced herself in them with her hijab around that. And it was a really interesting scenario because she was a Londoner and she was very much if you met her, you'd say very much a sort of like South Londoner. But when she had to go back to Iran, she had to wear modest clothes and so she had this idea and understanding of living in two cultures and who she was as a woman in those two cultures and how she negotiated it. But she said other people never really understood that, and she used fine art as a way of addressing that in these works. And I thought it was a really beautiful thing, and there was a really wonderful, nice, large-scale prints of that got sold straight away in the degree show when they were shown. I think the other thing that we have on the course is a series of really nice collaborations with outside entities and institutions, and that, like as I mentioned earlier on, Coat Your Own Wine, Science Museum, Southwark Council. We've worked with the V&A, the Science Gallery. We've had projects with Adidas, the Arts Council, the NHS. We've done stuff with the Arts Council, Camden Council as well. And so the idea of designing just not in the studio and in the world of students, but having a practical application to your design work is really crucial on the course. I mentioned earlier that we have a really high employment rate for our ex-students. Where do they go? I mean, not everybody goes to these places, but we've just recently had somebody working for Lucasfilms on the last 2 Star Wars films. One of them actually remade the last X Fighters. She's also gone on to work on the last iteration of Jurassic Park, building dinosaurs. Companies like 1.0 Technology Will Save Us, the BBC, the Institute of Making Secret Cinema, and Penguin Books. So, you know, we've got very sort of traditional design jobs, like going off to design book covers, but then also, you know, making dinosaurs for the movies or set design for Secret Cinema as well. On top of that, you know, jobs like art direction, cinematography, filmmaking, editing are really all areas that a lot of our designers go into, and how design crosses over into other disciplines, I think, is something that you really learn on IDA. And within the last 3 years, we've also had 2 people that have been pop-up chefs that are graduate from IDA. And a lot of people were initially, well, was it a waste of time studying design? We got them both to come in and talk and actually highlight why studying interaction design was really, really useful for being a pop-up chef and understanding how space works, how people engage with space, etc., was really, really useful to them. Rosa also mentioned DPS taking a year out. There are only 2 universities, I think, in the country that do this as a direct part of your degree. Design for professional studies gives you the option of, instead of taking a 3-year degree, you can do it as a 4-year degree, and you can get placements around the world. You can either do it with one spot, like this student here did it. She went to Australia for hers and ended up, that was a logo she designed for a TV company, an ident, which was really, really nice. And bearing in mind, she did this as an intern. She came second in a national competition around this. So, you know, it can be very, very big. It can be very, very small in terms of the things you do in that year. We try and talk you through about what you could do, where you could go and have contacts that are specific to us in the process. But it's not for everybody. And, you know, but I think it's a really nice option about you taking control about certain aspects of your education and what you want to do with it, and how you see placements and internships as part of the learning process, which are really, really useful. I realize we're kind of running a little bit late, but I think there are a couple of things that I'd like to show on this. It's like where some of our student filmmakers go. Now, these are up on our website, so I probably won't go over them now, but Deepa's a filmmaker now and has been working as a filmmaker for the last 7 years. And again, that's something she did not come onto the course ever thinking she was going to end up doing that. But through working through, I was an engagement with people and a project that really started to get her to look at herself culturally and her family and the history of her family and cultural background, it became really, really important to her. And that exploration of that meant that she started to document it. And through that documentation, she realized that she was documenting through the lens as much as anything else. First of all, through photography, then by recording. And she realized actually that whole idea of the moving image was a way that she really did engage with design. And from being a good student, she went to being a fantastic student and a really great filmmaker. And she's worked on a lot of things, particularly around pop promos, etc. The other thing that I think really important to point out about a number of our students is that we've had a couple of students nominated for the Designer of the Year award and Penny Webb in 2015. Most notably Minky Choi, who won it in 2010. That was the same year that Alexander McQueen, the designer, came second. This I always think is really interesting, purely on the grounds that it was a product that was initially designed. The first drawings for this were done in our studios. It's taken a number of years afterwards, and he graduated on his MA when he finished the actual thing. But this is a means of like taking the traditional 3-pin plug that you got in England and how unwieldy it was and how difficult it was to pack, to make it more compactable and usable. He's just come up with another iteration of this as well for the USB-C connectors, which is doing really well. And again, a lot of people would think about this as, okay, is this product designer? That's irrelevant to us. What we're concerned about is it problem solving and how that works for us. And it's a really classic example of that. As another student story. So what do we want from you? If you're applying for this course, your portfolio, a portfolio of work is, ultimately is going to say more about you than anything else. And again, in that portfolio, not only do we want to see skill sets, yeah, that's fine. But we realize you're at the beginning of a journey, not at the end of it. And so your skill sets may not develop. What we're interested in, as I said earlier on, are people that are interested in things. Sometimes that might just be a collection of photographs, your collection of objects, things that you've been doing, might just be sketchbooks, but some form of problem solving and process that we really like to see. If you're taking photographs, how did you get to that photograph? If you're fixing the gate in your granny's garden, how do you go about that process? Sometimes it's, a lot of the time students don't realize they're doing design and problem solving because they think, oh, I'm a photographer, I'm just taking photographs. We accepted somebody on the course 2 years ago on the grounds that actually it wasn't his photographs that were interesting. Well, they were good photographs, but he didn't get onto the photography course, and I offered him a place here, and he said, why? I'm a photographer. And I said, yeah, but look at the way you're displaying your photographs. Everybody else on his foundation stuck the photographs on the wall. He actually built something that highlighted the photographs. It was almost like a carousel. And I was like, look at the making skills here. Look at the design you've put into that. Just because you're a photographer doesn't mean, the design that you came up with to display that stuff isn't practical problem solving. And sometimes, students don't see that in themselves. And, it's our job to help them see their actual skill sets are 9 times out of 10, much broader than they think they are. Your personal statement, again, I think is something that should be speaking about you as an individual rather than what you think the course is and why you think you fit into it as well. I mean, those things are important, but we're interested in you and who you are and the journey that you're starting on. You're going to be with us for 3 years and hopefully you're going to learn a lot, but we're only 3 years of your education. We're not the 3 years of your education. Your education will start before you get to us, and hopefully, like people like Rosa and Digby, it will continue way after that as well. So you're also going to learn from each other on the course, and your interactions in your life so far are also the things we're interested in. Interaction doesn't start when you just get here. It's also, I think, worth having a look. I mentioned it at the beginning. If you get the chance, have a look at our student website. There's a college website, but we've got one specifically with our student projects on them, and nothing speaks about the course like the actual work the students produce themselves and some of the things that they want to talk about on there. So I always think that's the best place to go to see what it's like. The other option is at the beginning of this slide, it's got my email address on there. If you need to come in and have a look at things, well, contact us, and it's always worth coming in and actually speaking to the students themselves, because you're always going to get that personal touch. Okay, Evie, I will leave that there and then show Evie. I don't know if you anything else that you wish to speak to our applicants about, or if there are any other questions that anybody wants to put forward, or if students want to say anything else around this.
I'll just come in. Hi everyone. Thanks Joel and Rosa and Digby for talking about the course in such great depth, and it's quite inspirational seeing or the creative endeavours our students have gone in the past. I'm going to open the floor to any questions that our audience may have. If you could type those into the control panel under questions, I will pose those either to Joel or Rosa and Digby. We have a few here already, so I shall begin. So first question is asking, do I need to have a lot of technical skills before I start the course, or will I be able to learn these on the course?
The answer to that is no. You don't need to have them on. I think kind of Rosa's touched upon something earlier on when she was talking about not having certain skill sets when you came on the course, but then being inspired by the studio. You have, in the first year, we give you initial introductions to most of the technology, but we don't force people down the road. It's also about the case, okay, we give you tasters, and it's about where you want to go with the technology more than anything else. So we're really interested in ideas rather than the technology, and then we find out, okay, what are the things you need to learn on that? So there are ways of finding out the specific things, but rather than just saying, okay, here's introductions to every form of technology that you can, that will take up the whole course, and that ends up being training rather than education. So within the first year, we try and figure out what are the things you need to be the designer you need, that you want to be, rather than just specifically having generic introductions to everything. We give you tasters, but then it's about, okay, what are the follow-ups that we think are going to be best for you? Don't know if I hope that answers the question.
I think it does. Thank you very much. Here's another question for Rose and Digby, and it reads, how did you go about choosing interaction art design, and how did you know it was the right course for you? So if we can have Rose answering first and then Digby.
Yeah, sure. I think I couldn't choose. There were the few different courses that I was interested in. And in the end, I chose IDA because of that in-betweenness of media. So I wasn't sure if I was interested in I'd applied for like product design, art direction, and like visual design, like communication design. And I think IDA, what's great about it, kind of is that intersection between all these different media and directions. So it really allows you to follow multiple interests at the same time and develop those skills and how they might intersect. So that's why I chose it.
I studied a foundation at CSM beforehand, and it was brilliant at building portfolio, and you learn a lot of sort of technical stuff. But I was drawn to IDA in the sense, and I've mentioned this before, when you step on, and when you step into the studio, it is like almost like a spaceship. There's just stuff lying about, the stuff you can play with, a messy spaceship, and it's there's sort of it's a small course. It's almost like a family in that sense. There's sort of an educational journey rather than sitting in a lecture hall. And that, I mean, there's so many positives that you could just go on about speaking as the sort of attraction points there. But that was the winners for me in that sense.
Thank you both of you. That's excellent.
Thank you very much. I've got another question for you guys. How much do you collaborate with the students on the course?
Is that for me or for Digby and Rosa?
Let's start with Digby and Rosa, and Joel, if there's anything to add on, you can come in at the end.
I mean, hugely. And again, the sort of freedom that IDA offers, and actually Joel and Biggles and all the tutors and will support you and whatever. So I did a project around getting students to vote in a general election, giving out free beer to register to vote. And that was, we had this working with graphics design students for the sort of graphics behind the campaigns, almost design management, sort of photography students. So basically, if you want to, it is also can be done through the course, but if you want to sort of learn something on another course, it's easy as pie. Like, it will be facilitated in that sense. You can just go and do it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, in my first year, I immediately started. Because of the way that the studios are set up, you're constantly interacting with different years. So I was helping a third year with their science museum projects, and there's always stuff happening. So there's always someone that you can go up to and go, "Do you need a hand with this?" And there's always people you can ask to help out. And we also, I don't know if we're still doing it, I think global design studios. So there's opportunity to be like collaborating globally. So working with students at RMIT in Australia, in Melbourne. So you're getting to work not just within the course and within the university, but you can collaborate globally, which is an amazing skill.
I think that's a really good point. I forgot about that. That's a project that we do digitally. It's a 2-week design sprint that we do with colleges in Australia, Spain as well, and now Germany. And actually, we just got a university from Vietnam on board. The other thing is, unfortunately, Digby and Rosa missed out on this year because of COVID last year, I should say, is that we also every year go to Senegal. We take a group of students to Senegal out there, and we're working on a project out there, setting up a little design center for artisans and designers out there. So we, the collaboration happens in a number of ways, not just with other students, but without external factors. And we have in the past done a lot of social design, working with local communities, doing problem solving around the local area as well.
Fantastic, thank you. And on to our last question. Rosa and Digby, what are your future plans after you graduate? I know, Digby, you're currently doing the Masters, but what is there on the cards for you guys?
Well, I'm doing a Master's in biodesign currently, but I feel for me, it's sort of Joel spoke about sort of mentioning about how he believes it. I mean, interaction design is about how people interact with one another as much as anything. And I think we come from this very unique background where actually we've got the ability to positively shape communities using that sort of knowledge. And that is a sort of very broad definition, but actually being able to sort of understand people, objects, things, and that's where I'd say I'd like to sort of pivot myself in that way. Yeah.
I'm still trying to figure that out. One of the best things about the course is because you can do so many different routes, but that also means that sometimes you might be not quite sure where you want to go. But I mean, that also, I guess, it gives the opportunity to figure it out as you go and maybe shape a career path which fits those different intersections.
I'm like Rosa. I have no idea what I want to do, but I think I think it's really important that students come out with not just a sort of linear understanding of design or what they want to do. Some people think, oh yeah, that's my job and that's going to be it. I think it's important to know that the way things are changing in terms of technology, but also in terms of design education and things like that now. Half the jobs that you think you're going to do when you start a course or a BA or your education won't exist by the time you graduate. It's so rapidly changing now, or there'll be things that you haven't even heard of yet that will be the thing that you end up doing. And I think the most important thing that I hope we do with the course is actually prepare you for a world of change. The world is not static, it's in a constant state of flow, and part of that process is learning to engage with that as you go along.
Great, thank you very much. Well, that's really informative. That was the last of our questions. Thank you all of our visitors for joining us today. Thank you our panel for taking your time to talk about IDA in such depth and sharing your experience. Do check out all the other open days we have running and do come along to those. Alternatively, we hope to see your applications roll through in the coming months, weeks, or even years if you're an early researcher. Before we all part our own ways, do you guys have any last words of knowledge for our audience to take away?
I will also say, you know, invariably at open days, as soon as you get offline, you're like, oh, I should have asked this. On our website, my email's there, and so feel happy to drop me a line if you've got any other questions or about anything else in relation to the course, etc. Feel free to email me. Just sort of say, you know, that you turned up at the open day and who you are, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Yeah, I mean,
Fantastic.
the only other thing I'd say is like, I definitely apply to IDA out of all the courses probably in the country, I'd say. So yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
There you go.
Apply.
Okay.
And maybe go like speak to people within the university. I remember coming to the open day. The final like exhibition, graduation exhibition, and talking to different courses and telling them that I was applying to IDA, and people from different courses going, Joel and Biggles are amazing. I'm not even on the course and they've helped me out. So yeah, apply to IDA.
Thank you very much for that, Rose.
A shameless plug, we love it. And on those last words of wisdom, once again, thank you all for joining us. I'll be ending the session now. Have a good afternoon and bye-bye for now.